The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. Picture this: New Year's Day, 1907, Washington, D.C. The weather's oddly warm, and thousands of people are snaking down Pennsylvania Avenue, all waiting for the same thing: a chance to shake hands with the President of the United States. Inside the White House, trumpets blast. The man they're waiting for is about to pull off an insane marathon of handshaking that'll see him grip over 8,000 palms, setting a world record that'll last nearly a century. This guy is pure kinetic energy in human form. At 48, he's the youngest president the country's ever seen, but he already feels like a natural disaster that learned to walk upright. Here's the paradox: he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner who genuinely loves a good war. He's a published historian who writes like he's crafting adventure novels. He's a big-game hunter who's also the country's most aggressive conservationist. He can debate ancient Greek drama with Harvard scholars, then swap campfire stories with weathered cowboys from the Dakota Badlands. His friends worship him. His enemies loathe him. But nobody, and I mean nobody, can ignore him. This man is Theodore Roosevelt. And watching this human hurricane, this steam engine in trousers, you can't help but wonder how. How did this man become this unstoppable force of nature? That answer is the treasure we're hunting today, and trust me, it's a story that'll blow your mind. We're diving deep into Edmund Morris's Pulitzer Prize-winning masterpiece, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. This isn't just another dusty biography collecting cobwebs on a shelf. This is the actual blueprint for how a human being can literally force himself into greatness through sheer willpower. Because that man commanding the White House that day, the living symbol of American strength and vitality, started life as a boy who struggled just to breathe. By the time we're done today, you'll understand the profound, timeless lesson buried in Theodore Roosevelt's early years. The body you're born with doesn't determine your destiny. Your weaknesses aren't your permanent address. With enough willpower, enough grit, and enough relentless, exhausting work, you can literally rebuild yourself from scratch. You can, as his father once commanded him, make your body, and in the process you can make your future. So let's rewind the clock. Let's travel back to the beginning, to a quiet brownstone in New York City, and meet the boy who seemed destined for nothing, which paradoxically meant he could become anything. October 27, 1858. A baby boy enters the world in the wealthy Roosevelt family's New York City home. His mother, Mittie, a gorgeous Southern belle with a gentle nature, takes one look at her newborn son and announces, slightly disappointed, that he looks like a turtle. He's a noisy baby, but heartbreakingly frail. As he grows, a terrifying shadow creeps over his childhood, asthma's suffocating grip. Young Theodore, nicknamed T.D. by his family, spends endless nights gasping for air, a small, pale figure propped on pillows, fighting desperately for each breath. His sharpest childhood memories feature his father, a man of enormous strength and boundless love, pacing with him through the house for hours in the dead of night, trying to ease the horrifying spasms crushing his chest. Theodore Roosevelt Sr. was, in his son's eyes, the greatest man who ever lived. Handsome, powerful, driven by what he called a troublesome conscience that pushed him to help the city's forgotten poor. He founded orphanages, taught in mission schools, and came home with pockets bulging with sick kittens he'd rescued from the streets. He was the perfect specimen of masculine strength, like someone had carved him from solid granite. And then there was T.D., frail, nervous, timid, not just plagued by asthma, but by a parade of other ailments. He was so nearsighted the world was just a smear of colors. Clumsy and awkward, prime bully bait. While his younger brother Elliot charmed everyone and excelled at sports, T.D. was the family invalid, the brilliant but sickly kid who preferred books and dead animals in his bedroom. Roosevelt Museum of Natural History, a collection of birds, mice, and insects that horrified the household staff. His world existed in his mind. He devoured books with a hunger that would never fade. He loved adventure stories, tales of frontiersmen and soldiers and heroes who were everything he wasn't: fearless, strong, capable of defending themselves. He dreamed of becoming like them, of becoming like his father, but his body felt like a prison cell. Then one day, around age 12, everything shifted. His father called him into his study. Looking at his thin, wheezing son, he said something that would echo through Theodore's mind for the rest of his life. "Theodore," he said, using his formal name, "you have the mind, but you have not the body. And without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should. You must make your body." He paused, letting the weight of that challenge settle. "It is hard drudgery to make one's body, but I know you will do it." In that moment, something ignited. The boy stared back at his father, jaw clenched, and gave a reply that was half grin, half snarl. "I'll make my body." And so began one of the most remarkable transformations in American history. T.D. started hitting a local gymnasium. He spent hours daily on his family home's piazza, which his father had equipped with exercise gear. He punched, pulled, stretched, and swung, working himself into a trance of pure physical effort. His sister Corinne remembered the regular, monotonous motion as mind-numbing drudgery, but for T.D., it was liberation. It was a promise being kept. Slowly, painfully, fiber by fiber, he started building. The asthma didn't vanish overnight, but his chest began expanding. His muscles hardened. The boy who couldn't catch his breath was now climbing mountains, hiking for miles, reveling in his newfound strength. But life has a brutal way of reality checking you. On a stagecoach ride one summer, two boys his age spotted an easy target. They tormented him relentlessly, and when T.D. finally tried fighting back, he discovered he was completely helpless. They handled him with easy contempt, not even really hurting him, just neutralizing every move he made. The humiliation cut deep. He realized all his exercise had only brought him to baseline. To truly hold his own in the world, he needed more than strength. He needed to know how to fight. Accordingly, he wrote later, "With my father's hearty approval, I started to learn to box." He began taking lessons from a former prize fighter. He practiced obsessively, absorbing punches, learning to handle pain, and most importantly, learning to hit back. This wasn't about sport, this was survival, about never being helpless again. This combination of powerful intellect and fiercely willed body carried him to Harvard in fall 1876. He arrived as a swell, a New York dandy with eccentric side whiskers, a high-pitched, stammering voice, and an alarming habit of challenging professors mid-lecture. To his more laid-back classmates, he was a bundle of eccentricities. He was also becoming a force to be reckoned with. He boxed, wrestled, debated, wrote. He founded a finance club with a future Secretary of State and taught Sunday school. He fell hard for a beautiful, tall, golden-haired girl from Chestnut Hill named Alice Hathaway Lee. Through it all, he never stopped building his body and mind. He was driven by an almost desperate need to prove himself worthy of his father. Then, winter of his sophomore year, the unthinkable struck. Theodore Sr., his hero, his god, fell ill. It was brutal, agonizing, born from dirty politics. President Hayes had nominated him for high office, and in the vicious political battle that followed, the machine politicians, the spoilsmen, broke him. February 9, 1878, at 46 years old, he died. Theodore, racing home from Harvard, arrived too late. The loss was catastrophic. "He was everything to me," he wrote in his diary. For months, he wandered through a fog of grief so profound it bordered on madness. "Oh, Father, my Father, no words can tell how I shall miss your counsel and advice." He felt crushed by his own worthlessness. "I realize more and more every day that I am as much inferior to Father morally and mentally as physically." But from this despair emerged new resolve. The longing for the man who was gone transformed into desperate determination to be worthy of him in death. "How I wish I could ever do something to keep up his name." From this point forward, the drudgery of making his body became something sacred, a duty. The pursuit of knowledge became a mission. He graduated Harvard with high honors and married his sweet, pretty, pure Queen Alice Lee. He entered Columbia Law School, but his heart wasn't in it. The law, he discovered, was too often at odds with justice. His true calling lay elsewhere. Fall 1881, he joined his local Republican club. His wealthy friends were horrified. Politics, they insisted, was a low business, run by corrupt saloon keepers and fixers. Gentlemen didn't dirty their hands with it. Roosevelt's reply was classic him. "If that's true," he said, "then the people I knew did not belong to the governing class, and that the other people did, and that I intended to be one of the governing class." He plunged into machine politics, and with help from a shrewd Irish lieutenant named Joe Murray, found himself, at just 23, nominated for the New York State Assembly. He won easily and headed to Albany, where his fancy clothes and Harvard accent earned him the nickname the Dude. But the Dude could throw down. He quickly became known as the Cyclone Assemblyman, a whirlwind of reformist energy attacking corruption wherever he found it. He took on powerful corporations, corrupt judges, party bosses themselves. He made dangerous enemies, but also made a name for himself. He won re-election twice, becoming the Republican minority leader in the Assembly. His life was pure momentum. Rising political star, devoted husband, budding author working on a scholarly history called The Naval War of 1812. For the first time, he was genuinely happy. He and Alice were expecting their first child. And then the curse fell. February 12, 1884, while Roosevelt was in Albany, a telegram arrived. Alice had given birth to a baby girl. But a second telegram followed. Something was terribly wrong. He rushed back to New York through thick, chilling fog, his mind flooded with terrible dread. When he arrived home, he found his house shrouded in unimaginable horror. His mother, Mittie, the beautiful, gentle woman he adored, was dying of typhoid fever. And upstairs, in the room where she'd just given birth, his beloved Alice was also dying of an undiagnosed kidney disease. That night, in the early hours of Valentine's Day, his mother died. Theodore went from her bedside back to Alice's. He held his young wife as her life slipped away. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, she died. He was 25 years old. In 11 hours, he'd lost the two women he loved most in the world. In his diary, he drew a thick black cross and wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." He was shattered. The blow was so complete, so absolute, it threatened to destroy him. For a while, his family genuinely feared for his sanity. He seemed like a man in a trance, moving through the world but no longer part of it. Then he did the only thing he knew how to do. He went west. He fled to the Dakota Badlands, to the cattle ranch he'd invested in the previous year. He was searching for a place so vast and harsh it could cauterize his wound. He threw himself into cowboy life, working dawn to dark, pushing himself to the absolute limit of physical endurance. He hunted buffalo, rode for days on the open range, faced down gunslingers in frontier saloons. He became a deputy sheriff, and in dead winter, tracked 3 boat thieves for days down the frozen Little Missouri River, capturing them at gunpoint. He was trying to lose himself, but instead discovered a new part of himself. The dude from New York, the intellectual, the reformer, was forged into something harder, tougher. The cowboys, who initially mocked his spectacles and high-pitched voice, came to respect his grit, his sand. But nature had one more brutal test. The winter of 1886 to 1887 was the most savage in Western history. The winter of the blue snow. Blizzards of unimaginable fury swept down from Canada, burying the plains under feet of snow. Temperature plunged to 50 below zero. The cattle, unable to find grass, started starving. They gnawed bark off trees, then ate frozen twigs. Then they died. By the thousands. When spring thawed, rivers choked with carcasses. Roosevelt's massive investment was wiped out. He'd lost a fortune. The beef bonanza was over. He returned east a changed man. The West had given him a new body and new perspective. The grief for Alice remained, a hard knot in his soul, but it no longer consumed him. He never spoke of her again, not even to their daughter, also named Alice. He buried the memory so deep it was as if she'd never existed. He found solace in the quiet, steady companionship of his childhood friend, Edith Carew. Their friendship deepened into love, and in December 1886 they married in London. For a while, he retired from politics, content being a literary feller, living at his new home, Sagamore Hill on Long Island. He wrote history, biography, and tales of his Western adventures. He founded the Boone and Crockett Club, America's first major conservation organization, dedicated to preserving the big game he loved hunting. But the lure of the strenuous life, the call of the arena, proved too strong. When President Benjamin Harrison offered him a post as Civil Service Commissioner in Washington, he accepted immediately. For 6 years he waged relentless war against the spoils system, the corrupt practice of handing out government jobs for political favors. He became a thorn in party bosses' sides, a tireless, publicity-loving reformer who reveled in the fight. In 1895, he returned to New York City as president of the police board. The department was, in his words, a cesspool of corruption, from the chief of police down to beat cops. Roosevelt dove in to clean up with demonic energy. He became famous for his midnight rambles, prowling the city's darkest streets with his friend, reporter Jacob Riis, catching sleeping policemen and exposing their connections to the criminal underworld. He took on powerful saloon keepers, enforcing a long-ignored law requiring them to close on Sundays. He became, one newspaper declared, the biggest man in New York. But his ambitions stretched beyond New York. He dreamed of America taking its place on the world stage, of a powerful navy and assertive foreign policy. In 1897, the new president, William McKinley, appointed him Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Roosevelt found a sleepy, complacent department. He began preparing it for war. He believed conflict with Spain over its brutal colonial rule in Cuba was not only inevitable but necessary. No triumph of peace is quite so great as the supreme triumphs of war, he declared. He schemed, lobbied, pushed. He worked with his friend, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, and a small circle of influential expansionists. He made sure a fighting commodore named George Dewey commanded the Asiatic Squadron. February 15, 1898, the U.S. battleship Maine exploded in Havana Harbor. The Maine was sunk by an act of dirty treachery on the part of the Spaniards, I believe, Roosevelt wrote. The country, inflamed by sensationalist press, clamored for revenge. 10 days later, with his boss, Secretary Long, out of the office for the afternoon, Acting Secretary Roosevelt put the entire U.S. Navy on war footing. He sent a fateful cable to Commodore Dewey in Hong Kong. In the event of declaration war Spain, your duty will be to see that the Spanish squadron does not leave the Asiatic coast, and then offensive operations in Philippine Islands. War was declared in April. Roosevelt, true to his word, resigned his post. He was determined to fight. I cannot afford to disregard the fact that my power for good, whatever it may be, would be gone if I didn't try to live up to the doctrines I have tried to preach. He helped raise a volunteer cavalry regiment, a wild mix of cowboys, Ivy League athletes, and frontiersmen. Officially the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, but the world would know them by another name, the Rough Riders. With Leonard Wood as colonel and Roosevelt as lieutenant colonel, they trained in Texas, then shipped to Cuba. July 1, 1898, they faced their ultimate test. The American army was pinned down at the foot of the San Juan Heights, under withering fire from Spanish fortifications on the hills above. Roosevelt, on horseback, found his men crouching in tall grass, taking heavy casualties. An order came to support the regulars in the assault. The instant I received the order, I sprang on my horse, and then my crowded hour began. He rode up and down the line, urging his men forward. "Are you afraid to stand up when I am on horseback?" The men rose and followed him. He led them in a wild, chaotic charge up the smaller hill, Kettle Hill. He was among the first to reach the top, shooting a Spaniard with a revolver salvaged from the Maine. From there, seeing the Maine assault on San Juan Hill faltering, he led a second charge across the valley and up the final slope. He'd found his day. He'd led one of the noblest fights of the century. The sickly boy who once dreamed of heroes had become one. He returned from Cuba, the most famous man in America. The bosses of the New York Republican Party, led by his old foe Senator Thomas Platt, saw his popularity as their only hope for winning the governorship that fall. They nominated him reluctantly, and he won narrowly. As governor, he proved a masterful politician, balancing reform demands with political realities. He fought for corporate taxes, labor rights, conservation. He became so popular and so independent that the bosses decided they had to remove him. They couldn't defeat him, so they'd promote him, kick him upstairs into the political graveyard of the vice presidency. Roosevelt fought the nomination with everything he had. "I would rather be a professor of history than vice president," he declared. The job was a dignified nullity, a dead end, but pressure from the party machine, combined with genuine popular support from Western states, proved too much to resist. At the 1900 Republican National Convention, he was nominated to run alongside President McKinley. They won in a landslide. March 4, 1901, Theodore Roosevelt took the oath as Vice President of the United States. His political career, it seemed, was over. 6 months later, on a beautiful September afternoon, President McKinley was shaking hands at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. A young anarchist approached him, hand wrapped in a handkerchief. 2 shots rang out. At that exact moment, Theodore Roosevelt was high in the Adirondack Mountains, on the slopes of Mount Marcy. He'd just finished lunch with his family by a little lake called Terror of the Clouds. As he sat gazing at the vast wilderness, he saw a runner approaching, stumbling up the trail, clutching a yellow telegram. He knew instinctively what the message said. Destiny had called. The rise of Theodore Roosevelt was complete. So what do we take from this incredible story? What's the lesson in the life of this young, unstoppable man? For me, it circles back to that one simple, powerful command from his father: you must make your body. Think about that. It wasn't, "I hope you feel better." It wasn't, "Let's find you the best doctors." It was a command, a transfer of responsibility. Your body isn't a given. Your weaknesses aren't your fate. You have the power to build yourself into the person you want to be. And that's exactly what Theodore Roosevelt did. This book is way more than a history lesson. It's a testament to the power of human will. Here was a boy handed every health disadvantage imaginable. He could have lived a quiet, comfortable life as a wealthy invalid. Nobody would have blamed him. But he chose a different path. He chose the strenuous life. He chose to fight. He fought his own physical limitations. He fought the grief that threatened to swallow him whole. He fought bullies on the playground and corrupt bosses in politics. He fought the Spanish in Cuba. Life, for him, was constant struggle, and he loved it. This is where the lesson becomes incredibly relevant for you, right now, at 17. You're at an age where you're becoming aware of your own limitations, your perceived weaknesses. Maybe you're not the strongest or the smartest or the most popular. Maybe you feel stuck with the hand you've been dealt. Roosevelt's life is a roaring declaration that you're not. He showed us that character isn't something you're born with. It's something you forge. You forge it in the gym, pushing through one more representative. You forge it in the library, pushing through one more chapter. You forge it by facing your fears, taking on challenges that seem too big, and getting back up every single time you're knocked down. He wasn't perfect. Far from it. As Edmund Morris shows, he was often arrogant, impulsive, self-righteous. He had a lust for battle that can be unsettling. But his virtues, His courage, his honesty, his incredible work capacity, and his unwavering belief in potential for greatness, both in himself and his country, far outweighed his flaws. So what can you do today to start living a more Rooseveltian life? First, find your own version of making your body. Whether it's sports, academics, or art, find an area where you're weak and attack that weakness with relentless determination. Don't make excuses. Do the drudgery. The strength you build there will spill into every other area of your life. Second, become a voracious reader. Roosevelt's mind was his greatest weapon, and he sharpened it daily on the whetstone of books. He read history, science, poetry, fiction, everything. He understood that to lead, you must first learn. Finally, don't fear the arena. Don't be afraid to get in the fight. Whether it's a political cause you believe in, a team you want to make, or a personal goal you want to achieve, don't sit on the sidelines. Life, as Roosevelt knew, isn't a spectator sport. That was a summary of The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. We've journeyed through the incredible making of a man today, but let me be honest. A summary is like looking at a map of the Grand Canyon. It can show you the shape and scale, but it can never capture the breathtaking reality of standing on the edge, feeling the wind, seeing the colors shift with the light. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. This summary is a starting point, a way to decide if this story is one you need to experience in full. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, if you've felt a connection to that frail boy who refused to stay weak, then I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning history, it's about witnessing firsthand how a man can forge himself into a legend. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this journey has meant something to you, if you feel inspired or have learned something valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right path, and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.